You are bleeding billable hours and risking your BCBA credential because your supervision contracts are weak and your feedback is soft.
It's a harsh reality, but I mean, it's exactly what we're seeing across the field right now.
Yeah.
It's this systemic vulnerability that, most people just don't realize they have until they're literally staring down the barrel of an audit or like a mass staff exodus.
Right. Okay. So let's unpack this immediately, because I know that hook might have just spiked your heart rate if you're listening to this on your commute or maybe grabbing a coffee between clinic sessions.
Absolutely.
But we really need to have a serious, uncompromising conversation today. Our mission for this deep dive is mastering BACB task list item I.2. So that's identifying and applying strategies for establishing effective supervisory relationships.
Yeah. And let's be crystal clear right out of the gate here. This is not about being a, quote, nice boss.
Yeah.
It's not about everyone in the clinic liking you
Right.
or, inviting you to their weekend barbecue.
It's about clinical precision.
Exactly. It's about unapologetically clear expectations and delivering evidence-based feedback that actually changes behavior.
I'm so glad you framed it that way, because when we look at the data, the literature, all the source materials for this deep dive, the root cause of poor client outcomes almost always points back to a catastrophic failure in that supervisory relationship.
Yeah, without fail. It's rarely a lack of clinical knowledge,
Right.
Like you can have a clinician who can recite the white book cover to cover.
Right.
But if they lack supervisory structure, the clinical application just completely falls apart.
Totally. And I was actually thinking about this as I was going through the sources. Here is the analogy I really want you to hold on to for this entire deep dive.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think of your supervision contract as a behavior intervention plan, a BIP, right? But specifically designed for your supervisee.
Oh, I love that.
Because think about how we operate with our clients. If a client's BIP isn't in writing, if the target behaviors aren't operationally defined, and if it isn't signed by the stakeholders before day one, that intervention does not legally or ethically exist.
Period. It doesn't exist.
Right. We would never, ever just walk into a session with a brand new client, say, like a severe self-injury case, and say, hey, let's just feel this out.
Just vibe it out.
Yeah, let's see how the kid responds, and we'll adjust our management style on the fly.
That sounds insane.
It does. Yet that is exactly how hundreds of BCBAs approach supervision every single day. They just wing it.
And what's genuinely fascinating, and honestly a little terrifying, is how often we just completely abandon the very science we practice the second we step into a management role.
Oh, 100%.
Like we are behavior analysts, our entire professional identity relies on antecedent control, manipulating consequences, defining clear contingencies of reinforcement.
Yes.
But the moment an RBT or candidate sits across from us at a desk, we suddenly revert to these vague, mentalistic, non-behavioral approaches.
We talk about company culture.
Right. We hope they just, get it. We rely on their internal drive or their passion for the kids. And then, inevitably, when they fail to meet a standard we never actually defined, we blame their work ethic instead of looking at our own environmental design.
It's the ultimate blind spot. I mean, we analyze our clients' environments obsessively, but we treat our staff as if their behavior exists in a vacuum.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for task list item I.2? Let's get into the core concept, the clear clinical breakdown. What does establishing an effective supervisory relationship actually look like under the BACB standards?
Right, because the board doesn't just say, be a good manager.
No, they have extremely specific parameters.
They do. If we break down the clinical definition under I.2, it really rests on three non-negotiable pillars. First, executing supervisee contracts.
Okay.
Second, establishing clear expectations. And third, giving and accepting feedback. And I want to be clear, these aren't just best practices for running a business. These are ethical mandates that protect the credential, the supervisee, and most importantly, the client.
I really want to spend some serious time on that first pillar, the contract. Because looking through the source materials, specifically the BACB handbook and the ethics code, they do not treat the contract as just a mere administrative formality.
No, it's not just HR paperwork.
Right.
Per the handbook, the supervision contract is the ultimate antecedent intervention.
Yes.
It's the bedrock of the entire relationship. Without it, you do not have a mechanism for accountability. And here's the critical piece that I see supervisors miss time and time again.
What is it?
The contract must include objective, measurable circumstances under which the supervisor will not sign the fieldwork forms.
Wait, let me stop you there, because that feels intense.
I know.
Has to explicitly state in writing the exact conditions where you will look at a trainee and refuse to sign off on their hard-earned hours.
Absolutely. It must outline explicit consequences for non-adherence. I mean, think about it behaviorally. A contingency requires an if-then statement.
Right. If you engage in this behavior, then this consequence follows.
Exactly. The contract should state, for example, that if the trainee fails to bring graphed data to 3 consecutive supervisory meetings,
Okay.
or if they violate a core ethical principle, or if they fail to implement feedback after 3 structured coaching sessions, then the supervisor will terminate the relationship and will not verify those hours.
I have to push back on this a little bit, just putting myself in the shoes of a newly minted BCBA.
Sure.
Imagine someone who was just an RBT a year ago. They just passed their boards, and now they're supervising people they used to be peers with.
Well, that happens all the time.
Right, and it feels incredibly awkward, maybe even aggressive, to sit down on day one and lay out consequences and refusal to sign clauses. Doesn't that start the relationship off on a highly adversarial note?
Well, no. But it's a very common fear, especially for new clinicians battling imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But we have to fundamentally shift our perspective on what it means to be clear. Setting explicit expectations actually reduces anxiety and uncertainty.
Okay.
The literature in our sources strongly supports this. One of the texts explicitly notes that the absolute best way to clear up uncertainties is to create a comprehensive contract outlining expectations from both parties.
Because ambiguity breeds anxiety.
Exactly.
Like if I don't know where the edge of the cliff is, I'm going to walk very tentatively. But if you put up a bright red fence, I can run around freely anywhere inside that fence because I know exactly where the boundary is.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this aligns directly with Code 4.04, Accountability in Supervision.
Right.
As a supervisor, you are legally and ethically accountable for the professional activities of your supervisees. If your trainee makes an ethical error,
Or they fail to report abuse.
exactly, or they harm a client due to a poorly implemented procedure,
Yeah.
that doesn't just fall on them.
Yeah.
That falls on your BCBA credential. You own that. Therefore, the contract protects both the trainee and the clients.
Right.
The expectations you outlined have to cover everything: communication methods, boundaries, expected response times to emails.
Cancellation policies.
Yes, and exactly how and when performance feedback will be delivered.
So instead of being punitive, you're actually creating a safe, highly predictable environment. You're saying, hey, here are the rules of the game. Here's how you win. And here's exactly what happens if you step out of bounds.
Yeah.
That's not mean. That's just effective antecedent control. You're setting them up to succeed by removing all the guesswork.
Exactly. And let's be clear, the contract is just the blueprint. It's the paper. The real test of an effective supervisory relationship happens in the natural environment, in the clinic, in the home, the school setting.
Which brings us to the third pillar of task list I.2, feedback.
Right.
So let's ground this in a real example, because talking about feedback in the abstract is easy. Delivering it in the moment is where people freeze.
They absolutely freeze.
So I want to look at a clinic scenario derived directly from our source data. We have Dr. Blake. She's a seasoned BCBA, and she's conducting a direct observation.
Okay.
She is watching an RBT implement a behavior intervention plan for a 9-year-old client named Randy. Now, Randy has a significant history of disruptive classroom behaviors, throwing items, screaming, flipping chairs.
Very standard clinic profile.
Right. So during the observation, Dr. Blake realizes the RBT is really struggling. They are not following the BIP as prescribed.
Oh, boy.
Let's say the BIP calls for differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, but the RBT is reinforcing the wrong approximations, or they're completely missing the latency requirements. How does Dr. Blake handle this clinically in that exact moment?
So this specific scenario is the crucible of supervision. This is where we separate the elite educators from the average managers.
Yeah.
Because the natural instinct for many supervisors in Dr. Blake's position might be to just, quietly take notes, wait until the end of the week, and send a quick email with some bullet points.
Right, the passive approach.
Or, alternatively, they might just jump in, push the RBT aside, and take over the session themselves, because they know they can get Randy under instructional control faster.
But from a behavior analytics standpoint, neither of those are evidence-based supervisory actions.
Exactly, they're terrible.
Because if I just take over the session, I'm essentially providing an escape function for the RBT.
Yes.
They learn that if they struggle, the BCBA will just swoop in and do the hard work. It doesn't change their future repertoire at all.
Nope.
And sending an email 3 days later violates the principle of contiguity. An email doesn't provide an immediate consequence for the behavior that actually occurred on Tuesday.
Precisely. You are hitting on the exact behavioral mechanisms at play. The Supervisor's Guidebook we're referencing outlines a very specific 6-step, evidence-based feedback protocol that Dr. Blake needs to execute.
Okay.
And it's entirely grounded in the science of behavior.
All right, let's walk through this protocol. How does it actually start? Because walking up to an RBT who is actively drowning in a session feels like walking into a minefield.
It does. And that is why step 1 is so critical. The protocol states you must begin with an empathetic or positive statement.
Okay, now a lot of behavior analysts roll their eyes at this.
Oh, they hate it.
They think it's just corporate fluff. Or like a way to coddle the staff.
Yeah, but it actually serves a very specific behavioral function. It acts as an abolishing operation for escape-maintained defensive behaviors.
Oh, interesting.
Right. It pairs you, the supervisor, as a conditioned reinforcer rather than a conditioned punisher.
So it's not just about being nice. It's about reducing the likelihood that the RBT will engage in avoidance behaviors, like shutting down or arguing.
Yes, you're setting the occasion for the feedback to actually be received.
Give me an example. What does an empathetic statement sound like in Dr. Blake's situation?
So Dr. Blake might wait for a safe pause in the action. Approach the RBT privately and say, I know Randy has been escalating rapidly today, and I really appreciate how calm you have kept your vocal tone throughout this sequence.
Okay, that makes sense. You're acknowledging the difficulty of the environment. Then what?
Then you move to step 2. Specify exactly what the RBT performed correctly.
Okay.
And you must pinpoint a specific observable behavior. You don't just say, oh, you're doing great.
Right, no vague praise.
You say, your timing on the token delivery for his seated behavior was spot on. You delivered it within 2 seconds of his bottom hitting the chair.
I see. You're explicitly reinforcing a correct approximation, but now we have to pivot to the hard part, the correction.
Right. Step 3, specify exactly what the RBT performed incorrectly. And this is where supervisors often fail, because they get nervous and they start using mentalistic language.
Like what?
They say things like, you're being a little too soft with him, or you need to be more assertive. That tells the RBT absolutely nothing about what to physically do with their body.
Right, you have to be behavioral. You have to use operational terms.
Yes. Dr. Blake needs to say, however, when Randy began throwing his pencils, I noticed you provided verbal reprimands by telling him to stop. The BIP identifies your vocal attention as a known reinforcer for his disruptive behavior. The plan requires strict planned ignoring for pencil throwing.
Boom! Clear, objective, tied directly back to the clinical rationale. So now the RBT knows exactly what they did wrong.
Exactly.
But knowing what you did wrong isn't the same as knowing how to do it right.
Which brings us to step 4. Specify what the RBT needs to do to correct the behavior. This is the active teaching moment. Dr. Blake needs to outline the exact topography of the correct response.
Give me the script for that.
She would say, next time he throws a pencil, I need you to immediately break eye contact, turn your body slightly away, and withhold all vocalizations until he is quiet for 10 full seconds.
Wow, okay.
And critically, this step often involves Dr. Blake actually modeling the correct physical behavior right there in the room.
You're literally shaping their behavior in real time.
Yes.
So then what?
Yeah.
I imagine we have to check for understanding.
Step 5. Solicit questions from the RBT to ensure understanding. Dr. Blake asks, does that sequence make sense, or do you want me to model it again before you try?
Right.
This ensures the rule is clearly established before the trainee is expected to follow it.
And finally.
Step 6. Inform the RBT about subsequent supervisory actions. You have to close the loop.
Okay.
Dr. Blake says, I'm going to step back and observe you run this program for the next 10 minutes, and I will be back on Thursday specifically to check on this target again.
That sequence is incredibly systematic. Positive pairing statement, specific correct behavior, specific incorrect behavior, how to correct it, solicit questions, and state subsequent actions. It leaves absolutely zero room for misinterpretation.
It is the clinical standard.
But let me throw a wrench into this perfectly sterile clinical scenario.
Oh, you do.
Because we don't work with robots. We work with human beings who carry their own complex reinforcement histories.
We sure do.
Another scenario from our source data brings up a very common human element. What if the supervisee, let's call him Tom. What if Tom is highly sensitive to criticism? Let's say Tom is a fantastic guy, the kids love him, but in the past, whenever he receives corrective feedback, he gets incredibly defensive.
Right.
His body language shuts down, he starts making excuses, or maybe he even cries. This is a very real thing that happens in clinics every day.
It happens all the time.
Do we soften the feedback for Tom? Do we maybe skip step 3, the explicit statement of what he did wrong, just so we don't crush his morale and risk him quitting?
This is such a critical scenario because it forces us to confront the balance between staff morale and clinical fidelity.
Right.
It is deeply uncomfortable to give feedback to someone who is crying or visibly angry. But if we look strictly at the source data and the BACB ethics code, the answer is an unequivocal no. You do not soften or skip the corrective feedback.
Wait, really? You just push through the defensiveness, even if you know it's going to ruin his afternoon?
You provide immediate, specific feedback in a private setting. You absolutely utilize step 1 and step 2, starting with those specific positive pairing statements to try and mitigate the emotional response.
Okay.
And you conclude with encouragement. But you must address the specific areas needing improvement. Think about the alternative here.
Right.
Withholding corrective feedback to protect a supervisee's morale limits their comprehensive development. You are doing them a disservice as a clinician.
Yeah.
But more importantly, and this is the crux of the issue, it harms the client.
Oh, wow.
If Tom is implementing a procedure incorrectly,
Right.
Randy is the one suffering the consequences.
Right. Randy is the one whose target behaviors are increasing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Randy is the one losing access to a less restrictive environment.
When you frame it that way, it shifts the entire moral weight of the situation.
Completely.
Prioritizing the supervisee's feelings over the client's treatment fidelity isn't just being a nice boss. It's actively committing an ethical violation. Code 1.03 states explicitly that we must prioritize the rights of clients above all else.
Exactly. It's a fundamental failure to provide effective supervision. And as we know from the literature, ineffective supervision directly leads to poor client outcomes.
Right.
If Tom is highly sensitive, you might adjust how you deliver the positive reinforcement in other contexts. Or you might increase the amount of behavioral skills training you do in a contrived setting before putting him in the natural environment.
Make him practice before the real thing.
Right. But the corrective feedback itself, when an error occurs, is non-negotiable.
Here is where it gets incredibly practical, because understanding that theory brings us perfectly into the common mistakes, the specific traps that so many well-intentioned supervisors fall into.
Oh, the traps.
Let's look at trap number 1. I call this the retroactive trap.
Oh, this is a classic. It happens every single semester, and it is incredibly dangerous for your board certification.
In our source materials, there is a fascinating yet tragic case study. We have a BCBA candidate who approaches a clinic, BCBA, and asks them to sign off on their fieldwork hours retroactively.
Oh, boy.
Here's the backstory. The candidate was working as an ABA therapist under this clinic, BCBA. However, there was also a university BCBAD involved in the student's practicum.
Typical setup.
The student, operating on assumptions, thought the university BCBAD was the one formally supervising their hours. The university BCBAD, on the other hand, thought the clinic BCBA was handling the supervision.
It's the classic bystander effect of supervision.
It really is. So, long story short, months go by, no one had a signed BACB supervision contract with the student, and now the student realizes they're missing hundreds of hours.
Brutal.
They come into the clinic BCBA's office, literally begging them to just sign the paperwork so they can sit for their exam. The student's argument is, come on, you were in the building, you saw me run sessions, you're technically overseeing the program, just sign the form.
It is a heart-wrenching situation, but this is where you have to draw an absolute impenetrable hard line in the sand.
Right.
Under Code 4.011, behavior analysts must comply with all supervision requirements set forth by the board. The BACB fieldwork requirements are not suggestions, they are mandates.
Yeah.
And they explicitly state that a supervision contract must be fully executed, meaning signed and dated by both parties before supervision begins.
Let me make sure I understand the gravity of this.
No.
Even if you watched this student deliver flawless DTT for 6 months, even if you gave them verbal feedback every day, if that piece of paper wasn't signed prior to minute 1, no hours.
No prior contract means no hours, period.
Wow.
You cannot retroactively sign for hours if a contract was not in place.
Yeah.
The board's logic is sound here. Going back to our earlier point, the contract establishes the contingencies.
Right.
If the student did not have a contract, they were not operating under the explicit, agreed-upon contingencies of a supervisory relationship.
So it doesn't exist.
The relationship, for the purpose of BACB fieldwork hours, did not legally or ethically exist.
And if the clinic BCBA caves, let's say they feel terrible for the student. They know the student is a good clinician, and they just sign the form to be a good person. What happens?
If you sign that form, you are falsifying documents.
Ooh.
You are attesting to the board that a formal supervisory relationship existed during a time frame when it did not. That is a massive ethical violation that can and will result in the suspension or revocation of your own BCBA credential.
It's heartbreaking for the student. They lose months of work. But as the supervisor, you simply cannot risk your hard-earned credential to fix someone else's administrative error.
It perfectly illustrates why our first pillar, the contract, is so vital. If the contract isn't signed, the intervention hasn't started.
I want to transition to trap number 2, because we touched on this briefly with the Tom scenario, but it goes much deeper. Trap 2 is the compliment sandwich and subjective evaluation.
Oh, this crap is insidious.
Oh.
Because it disguises itself as good management. It feels good to the supervisor, but it is deeply toxic to the supervisee's growth.
The source data presents a highly relatable scenario with an RBT named Misty.
Okay.
Misty is a solid technician, but she is getting increasingly frustrated because her supervisor, Bernadette, rarely observes her directly. And when Bernadette does finally drop in and give feedback, it's just a general passing comment like, hey, Misty, you're doing great. The kids really love you. Keep up the good work.
The classic drive-by compliment.
Right. Now, a lot of supervisors would think they were being wonderful, supportive leaders by saying that, but Misty actually files a complaint. She is frustrated because she is self-aware enough to know she can't be doing everything perfectly.
Yeah.
She wants to grow her clinical repertoire, she wants to become a BCBA one day, and she is getting absolutely zero actionable data on her performance.
Misty's frustration is completely justified, and it highlights a massive failure on Bernadette's part. This is the danger of delivering vague feedback without documenting an improvement plan or tracking specific, measurable data points.
I want to offer an analogy for this because as I was reading Misty's scenario, it hit me. I look at subjective, vague praise like taking unscored IOA data, inter-observer agreement data.
Oh, that is a brilliant way to frame it. Walk me through that.
Think about it. Imagine you are taking IOA data alongside another therapist. You have a data sheet, and for an hour, you are furiously writing down checks and minus signs for every interval.
You're doing the work.
Right, you're filling the page with marks. But at the end of the session, you never actually calculate the percentage of agreement. You never compare your data to the primary observer's data. You just file the paper away.
Right.
If someone looks at your clipboard, it looks like you took data. It looks like scientific rigor. But because it remains unscored, it tells you absolutely nothing about the accuracy of the observation. It possesses zero functional value. Vague praise, saying you're doing great, is the unscored IOA of supervision. It creates the illusion that supervision is happening. It sounds nice in the moment, but it possesses zero functional value for actually changing the supervisee's future behavior.
That is incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
You are going through the motions of supervision without executing the mechanism of change. And the ethics code addresses this systemic failure directly in Code 4.08, performance monitoring and feedback.
Right.
The code dictates that feedback must be timely. It must include both informal and formal components, and crucially, it must be designed to actually improve performance.
Yes.
Furthermore, you must document the formal feedback delivered. Writing Misty is doing great on a sticky note is not documented formal feedback designed to improve performance.
So what does Bernadette need to do differently? How does she fix this?
Bernadette needs to utilize objective performance checklists. When she observes Misty, she shouldn't just be taking a holistic vibe check. She should be taking data on Misty's correct implementation of specific BIP components, calculating her treatment fidelity percentage, and graphing it. Then she shares that graph with Misty.
Show her the data.
Yes. Misty, your treatment fidelity on the token economy was 85% today. The goal is 95%. Let's look at the intervals where errors occurred. That is data-driven, actionable feedback.
And what if a trainee isn't doing great? What if there are serious chronic performance deficits?
Code 4.08 is explicit on this as well. If performance problems arise, a formal written improvement plan is mandatory. You do not just keep giving them compliment sandwiches hoping they'll catch on.
Right.
You develop, communicate, implement, and evaluate a structured improvement plan with clearly identified procedures and criteria for mastery.
But that requires an immense amount of time and dedicated focus from the supervisor.
It does.
Which logically brings us to trap number 3, and I think this one is purely systemic: supervisory volume overload.
Yes. This is perhaps the most pervasive, quietly accepted ethical issue in the field of applied behavior analysis right now. It is the elephant in the room that large agencies don't want to talk about.
Let's expose it. We have a scenario derived from the mock exam questions in our source data. Imagine a clinic policy that offers its supervising BCBAs a financial incentive structure. They get a 10% commission on the billable hours that their RBTs report, and this is on top of their standard salary. Furthermore, the RBTs are largely responsible for keeping track of their own hours and scheduling.
A recipe for disaster.
Right. So if you look at the contingencies here, the BCBA is highly financially incentivized to take on as many RBTs and supervisees as humanly possible. The more supervisees they claim, the higher their paycheck.
It is a textbook example of a system designed to punish quality and reinforce quantity. And what do you think happens when a single BCBA takes on 15, 20, or even 25 supervisees just to maximize their commission?
The quality of supervision inevitably collapses. There are only so many hours in a week. They stop doing the meticulous 6-step feedback protocol we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They stop doing direct in vivo observations because they physically can't be in 25 places at once. They start relying heavily on asynchronous emails, group text messages, and massive, generalized monthly group meetings that don't actually shape individual behavior.
Exactly. The supervision becomes purely administrative, not clinical. And this is a direct, flagrant violation of Code 4.03, supervisory volume.
Hard to say.
The code requires that supervisors must only take on a volume of supervisees that is commensurate with their ability to be effective. The board explicitly states you must ensure you have the time, the resources, and the ability to supervise effectively.
Right.
Overload leads to ethical violations. It leads to massive drops in treatment fidelity by the RBTs. And ultimately, it leads to poor, sometimes dangerous, client outcomes.
It is the clinical equivalent of taking on too many severe behavior clients. You wouldn't write 30 highly complex, individualized BIPs for severe aggression if you only had the clinical hours to actively monitor and update 10 of them.
It would be malpractice.
Exactly. By that exact same logic, you shouldn't take on 30 trainees if you can only effectively shape the behavior of 10.
What's fascinating here is that the source text explicitly recognizes this danger. It states that taking on too many cases for financial incentives or pressure from upper management can directly promote unethical behavior.
Yes.
It states that providing effective, high-quality supervision is the line in the sand that ethical BCBAs must draw against employers who push for higher volume over clinical integrity.
You have to push back.
You have to be willing to tell your clinical director, no, I cannot take on another supervisee because doing so would compromise my effectiveness with the ones I already have.
That takes a lot of courage, but as you said, it's the line in the sand.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to pivot our focus now. If you are listening to this because you are actively prepping for your BCBA or BPJA boards, pay very close attention to this next section.
Oh yeah, listen up.
We are transitioning to the exam strategy. We are getting into the specific logic of the Pearson VUE exam. How do all these rich, nuanced clinical concepts translate into a cold, hard, 4-option, multiple-choice question?
It's a great transition.
Yeah.
Because understanding the clinical reality is only half the battle. The other half is understanding how the exam tests that reality. The exam logic is very specific when it comes to supervision and management scenarios.
Right.
It relies heavily on immediate, direct, and data-based behavioral actions.
Let's break down scenario 1. If you see a question on the exam where an RBT is actively implementing a procedure incorrectly during a session, and the question asks what the BCBA should do to intervene.
The overarching rule is this. Choose the answer that specifies providing immediate specific feedback in a private setting, focusing on both correct and incorrect areas.
Yes. Let's talk about the distractors because the test writers are clever.
They are very clever.
They will give you options that sound reasonable in a corporate environment. Do not choose the answer that says, send an email detailing the correct procedures after the session.
Right. Why?
Because it violates contiguity. Do not choose the answer that says, wait for the monthly team meeting to discuss the error so everyone can learn from it.
Because that compromises the client's current treatment
Yeah.
and violates the supervisee's privacy.
Exactly. The exam wants to see that you understand the necessity of immediate consequences for behavior change, while still maintaining the professional dignity of the supervisee by doing it privately.
Exactly. The exam is testing your adherence to behavioral principles applied to staff. Now, let's look at scenario 2, which relates to the retroactive trap we discuss.
Okay.
If you see a scenario where a trainee has been supervised by a different BCBA who unexpectedly left the agency, or there was a misunderstanding about who the supervisor was, and the trainee asks you to sign their monthly fieldwork verification form without a contract in place between the two of you.
The rule is absolute. Choose the answer that involves refusing to sign the form.
Correct. The distractors here will test your emotional boundaries. They will offer options like sign the form but implement a retroactive contract, or sign the form only for the hours you directly observed.
And both are wrong.
Both are completely wrong. A contract must be executed before supervision begins. You cannot retroactively validate hours that you did not explicitly contract to oversee.
The exam will try to make you feel bad for the trainee, won't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It will paint a picture of a desperate student who is going to lose their job. But the ethical code is black and white.
That is such a crucial point for test takers. The exam will purposefully tug at your heartstrings to see if you will compromise the code for compassion. You have to answer based on the BACB ethics code, not your personal emotions.
Precisely. Now, let's elevate this conversation. We've talked about the foundational rules, we've dissected the common mistakes, and we've covered the exam strategy. I want to get to the clinical power insight, the advanced theoretical paradigm shift that truly separates an average day-to-day supervisor from an elite clinician and educator.
I love this part. This is where we go beyond passing the test and talk about mastering the craft. Okay, hit us with the advanced thinking.
The advanced insight, synthesized from the deepest layers of the supervision and ethics literature, is this. Supervision as a word is actually a non-behavioral term.
Wait, explain that to me. We've been using the word supervision for the last 40 minutes. How is it non-behavioral?
Think about the etymology and the common usage of the word. Supervision implies overseeing, watching, or managing from above. It describes a static state or an administrative function.
Okay, I follow you.
But that word does not describe an active mechanism of behavior change. In behavior analysis, we don't just oversee clients, we actively change their behavior.
Right.
Therefore, the behavioral equivalent of the word supervision is actually shaping using behavioral skills training, or BST.
Oh, wow. That completely flips the script. You aren't a supervisor. You are a shaper of clinical repertoires.
Exactly. A supervisee's behavior follows the exact same principles of behavior as the clients you serve. The source text explicitly states this. We cannot expect emergent, generalized clinical skills from a trainee just by talking at them in a meeting, or sending them a PDF of a journal article, or giving them a vague pep talk.
Because that relies entirely on rule-governed behavior, which we know is notoriously weak compared to contingency-shaped behavior.
It makes total sense. Think about our clients. You wouldn't just sit across from an autistic client who has a severe social skill deficit and say to them, hey, I need you to go generalize this complex social initiation skill on the playground, and then just walk away expecting them to do it.
That would be absurd. You would provide explicit instructions, you would model the skill for them, you would have them rehearse it with you in a safe environment, and you would provide immediate contingent feedback based on their performance.
Precisely. That is behavioral skills training. You must apply that exact same rigorous science to your staff. If an RBT is failing to run a token economy correctly, you do not write them up immediately.
No.
You do not just send them an email. You put on your clinician hat and you assess, is this a skill deficit or a performance deficit? Does the RBT not know how to do it, or do they know how, but lack the motivation or environmental support to execute it?
And if it's a skill deficit?
If it is a skill deficit, you use BST. You provide the clinical rationale so they understand the why. You physically model the correct token delivery, showing them the exact latency and physical proximity required.
And then practice.
Yes. You have the RBT practice it with you in a role play, maybe pretending you are the client. You give them immediate feedback on their role play, and then, and only then, you observe them running it with the actual client in the natural environment.
Let's be honest, though. Hearing you describe that, it is exhausting just thinking about it.
It is a lot of work.
It is incredibly time-intensive, which loops us right back around to why Code 4.03, Supervisory Volume, exists.
Exactly.
If you have 20 supervisees on your caseload, you mathematically do not have the time to conduct rigorous behavioral skills training with all of them. You physically cannot model, role play, and provide in vivo feedback for that many people.
You literally can't.
So what happens? You revert to talking at them, you revert to sending emails, which isn't behavior analysis at all.
And that is the ultimate, undeniable takeaway of this entire deep dive. If you are not actively utilizing reinforcement, shaping, and behavioral skills training with your staff, you are not actually providing behavior analytic supervision. You're just being a corporate manager holding a BCBA certificate.
That is a mic drop moment. We need to treat our supervisees with the exact same clinical rigor, the same reliance on objective data, and the same behavioral compassion that we apply to our most complex clients. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive into task list item I.2, I want to circle back to where we started. We talked about how ambiguity is the enemy of effective supervision. Well, in supervision, your signed contract, your explicit expectations, and your rigorous feedback protocols are your clinical X-ray machine.
Oh, I love that.
They remove the murkiness, they make expectations visible, objective, and binary. Did the RBT follow the BIP, or didn't they? Did the candidate meet the objective criteria for their fieldwork hours, or didn't they?
That visibility, while sometimes uncomfortable to establish initially, is what ultimately creates a safe, ethical, and highly effective environment for everyone involved. So I will leave you with this final provocative challenge.
Let's hear it.
Ask yourself right now, if your clinical supervision files were suddenly audited by the BACB today, would your documentation objectively prove that you are actively shaping behavior using evidence-based protocols like BST, or are you just lazily checking boxes to hit your 5% requirement?
That is the question you have to answer honestly. If this helped you, follow behavioral intelligence, share this episode with another RBT or BCBA who's studying, and leave a comment or review. That's how we grow, and how I keep creating high-level content for you.
At Amethyst Therapy Services, Inc., we build clinicians, not just test passers. Visit us at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or reach out at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.